I'm Rebecca Ward with the Voice of America. Thanks for joining us today as we speak with Bill Murray, an analyst and journalist at Energy Intelligence. Bill, thanks for joining us today.
Happy to be here.
Much of the alternative energy that is in the United States and across the world is being subsidized by governments. So do you think that energy companies such as Exxon, BP, or oil companies, I should say, and coal companies, perhaps, how do they feel about that?
Actually, it's interesting. I mean, coal companies and energy companies producing fossil fuels, they do it in the marketplace. But back in the day, back in the 19th century when they were starting, there were all different kinds of government ways to help out these very small and startup industries. And now you have wind and solar and other kinds of energy startups for what we would consider alternative energy. But it's a common practice for governments for the last many decades to actually target certain industries that they want to support and give tax subsidies and different kinds of benefits.
One of the more promising alternative energies, of course, is solar power. So looking back over the past few years, it's come a long way, so it seems, but it's where is it going, and how really applicable is it to a consumer's daily life?
Today and tomorrow it's not necessarily applicable, but again, the technology issues are relevant. One of the things we've seen with other alternative energies, whether it's wind or ethanol, is it takes about 25 years when you start investing for it to actually become a meaningful, even a measurable part of the overall energy use or supply. So these things in solar aren't going to take off in any fast way, but the rate of change and the rate of growth is quite extraordinary. And the more investment that takes place, the more places, especially in the southwest parts of the United States, especially in other places throughout the world, you can take advantage of solar energy, which is of course coming down all the time, and the numbers are astounding. If we actually properly used a portion of the sun's heat here on Earth, we really wouldn't have any need for any other energy source. So it's a long-term investment, but long-term investments do pay off over the long term.
What we see now, for the most part, or as just a consumer looking at energy sources, I see mostly solar panels being put up next to companies who are using solar power directly for their benefit or to subsidize their power. And one of the criticisms about alternative energy, including wind and solar, is that it doesn't transmit across long distances. So the Northeast coast, although some parts have wind power, not a lot of solar power being generated on the East Coast. So how do you get from the Southwest to the Northeast?
It's a good question. It's an infrastructure issue. It's not just that you have panels down in Arizona or New Mexico, that you want to be able to send it to other places where the demand is quite high, whether in California or Texas or even the Northeast. Part of the smart grid that they talk about and fund is actually very relevant. The smart grid is really a term that means digitizing the electrical grid. Right now it's very much analog. It's, Thomas Edison would recognize the technology. Once you're able to digitize it and able to have it work essentially like we would expect an internet to work, talking at the speed of light, then you're able to move these electrons from the East Coast to the middle of the country or from the Southwest to other parts. So it's a big infrastructure, trillions of dollars over time. But what the Obama administration has done, and other people around the world, especially in China, are doing, is funding a smart grid for the infrastructure that can then handle solar power that would be not from companies necessarily, but just from individual homes.
So do you see ever alternative energy such as solar supplanting oil and gas and coal?
Oh, it depends
as the fuel of choice?
Well, it depends on the time frame. Not anytime soon, not in the next 10 or 20 years. But technology, remember, oil and gas is a technology as well, and 200 years ago they weren't actually being used. Whale oil was pretty popular in about the mid-19th century, and that went out the window. So it is actually possible by the end of this century that we could see serious alternative energy in a post-fossil fuel era. But we're not there anytime soon, so you're still going to be filling up your car with gas.
One of the things I find most interesting is that individuals suddenly, putting little windmills on their roofs or funding solar panels for their rooftop. And I think that that's a really interesting way to approach not only just cost efficiency, but if you're a greenie, if you're really interested in saving the planet, this is one small way, and you're basically saving some money perhaps over the long term. Do you see more of that coming around?
I do. The reason that people are able to do this is that there are some tax benefits to it. They didn't exist a couple years ago, and in the Congress and in the stimulus package.
But will the cost come down?
The cost will come down over time, but it has to be sustained. We've seen this once before. This did happen in the late 70s. Technology was not as advanced, and the subsidies and the tax benefits for individuals and companies disappeared. And once that disappears, people are going to have a tough time justifying it for themselves.
Thank you, Bill. Bill Murray is a journalist and analyst with Energy Intelligence. I'm Rebecca Ward at the Voice of America.